Okay, hello everybody. Great to be with you. My name's Andy Brims from Croydon Vineyard Church, and I've got the privilege today of being joined by Catherine Hill from Care for the Family. Care for the Family is a national charity that works towards the strengthening of families and equipping parents and just doing a great work. Catherine is a parent, a grandparent. She has a background in the law, and she's now the UK Director of Care for the Family, I believe. So hello, Catherine. It's fantastic to have you with us.
Well, hi. It's really, really great to be with you. So I'm looking forward to it.
Did I miss anything on your introduction? Is there anything else you can tell us about yourself? Maybe how did you come to faith, and how did you get involved in Care for the Family? That would be great to hear.
Oh, lovely. Okay. So I came to faith really at university. I was brought up in a home where we went to church. I went to boarding school, but faith was very much something that you had to do on a Sunday. And when I came to university, I remember meeting people who talked about praying about everyday stuff, and their faith was so much more vibrant and alive and meant something 24/7 rather than just this thing that you did on a Sunday. And so, yeah, it was at university really that I put my faith in Jesus. I think if I'll know one day when it really was, but I think it was then. And then since then, there've obviously been lots of opportunities to just continue to grow and discover more. So, yeah, that's my faith journey. And then the other question was how I got involved, I think, with Care for the Family.
With Care for the Family, yeah. How did that come about?
So you mentioned that I was a lawyer. I was a family law solicitor. So I dealt with a lot of the really tough stuff of family life. So the particular the practice that I had, there was quite a lot of domestic violence. I did stuff to do with adoption, care proceedings, that sort of thing as well. But primarily divorce, and where marriages have just not worked out as people had hoped for whatever reason. And of course, we know it's not possible to save every marriage, but nevertheless, I was upfront with the heartache really of family life, and I think through that, I just developed a real heart to want to see family life strengthened, and through an amazing set of circumstances, which would take most of this interview to explain, but I came to be offered this job at Care for the Family, which I absolutely love. So my role, it's UK Director, I'm on the leadership team, and I really do now speaking and writing, looking at the content, as well as some of the having a say in the leadership of the organisation. So that's my job.
Brilliant, amazing. And if anybody out there hasn't heard of Care for the Family at all, just who are you as an organisation? What's the ethos? What are you guys about as a charity?
So Care for the Family was established 30 years ago by Rob Parsons. So Rob, also a lawyer, and when he was working, he realised that some of his family life, I think, was slipping by, and he realised that there were many, many organisations in those days that were coming alongside families in crisis, but there weren't many who were actually helping families build put strong walls around family life, learn good habits in the good times, as well as be able to withstand the storms of life when they come. And we know that every family at some stage goes through tough times. So Care for the Family was established then. We talk about being the fence around the top of the cliff rather than the ambulance at the bottom, although we do want to be there for people when they hit hard times. And so we work in the area of prevention. We work in the area of marriage and couple relationships. We work in the area of parenting. So we have resources for single parents, for parents of children with additional needs, and then bereavement, and two specific areas there, which is if someone has lost a child or someone has been widowed early in life. And we offer peer-to-peer support and befriending. And we just have loads of courses and resources. And when we're not in a pandemic, we go around the country on tour, speaking into areas of family life. And I should have said we're a Christian charity. A lot of what we do is suitable for anyone and everyone. So our resources can be used in schools, in prisons, in all kinds of community settings. And then we have some really specific material for the church, but all our material has got kingdom principles in it.
Amazing, so good to hear. So I first came across you individually. I'd heard of Care for the Family before, seen Rob speak many times, but our pastor Leslie, she passed me your book, Left to Their Own Devices: Parenting in the Age of the Screen, and I read it. Fantastic read, fantastic book, and I really just wanted to get you on and in front of us as a church and in front of the people who look at our stuff, just to pick your brains a little bit about your wisdom for parenting in the age of the screen. Such a big issue for so many of us and for so many of our families. Now, as I read Parenting in the Age of the Screen, I suppose I took kind of two angles from it. There was kind of the general principles of just parenting and doing family life in this time, and then particularly some of the latter chapters, there's kind of specific issues, specific problems that come up. But I wondered if we could start just by talking about the kind of general principles of parenting and family in this time that we live in. What are some of the key ways that you equip parents and that we can tackle this life that we have to live?
Well, it's very hard at the moment, I think, particularly for parents. So many having to juggle homeschooling, home working. If schools are open, then very often children being sent home because somebody's tested positive in the class, and parents are just having to be incredibly flexible, and just trying to manage all that is a really difficult thing. So right throughout all our messaging for families is the fact that we want to come from a place of vulnerability, and we want to say you're not alone and you are doing a great job. No one knows your child like you. No one loves your child like you. So, lay down the guilt as far as possible and have confidence in your parenting. And I guess if we had to summarize parenting in 2 words, I would say love and boundaries. Those would be the 2 things that underpin a lot of our messaging for parents. So, how do we show our children that they are loved in a way that they feel loved, so that they know that they are secure in their identity? So, the world is telling them that they have to look like this, or be like this, or own this in order to be loved. And we'll come on to this, I'm sure, in a minute, but social media is making that 100 times worse. And as parents, we can give them that incredible message that they're loved for who they are. They don't have anything to prove. And secondly, boundaries. Most parents, I think it's one of the things we get asked most about is, how do you lay down the boundaries? Whole areas of discipline. And again, just knowing that boundaries are so important for our children's security. There's nothing more destined than for it to breed insecurity in a child than for them to be no boundaries, or if they are, that no one cares if they cross them. But equally, if we're really strict and put down too many boundaries, then that's not great either. So we talk about different styles of parenting: permissive on the one hand, anything goes; authoritarian on the other side, which is the sergeant major. And what we talk about, we want to aim for, is called assertive, which is as few rules as possible, but the ones that we do are in line with our values, and we follow through on the consequences. We say what we mean what we say. That's a good phrase. And it all sounds so easy, doesn't it? Sitting here chatting to you, and then when it's all kicking off at home, it's hard. But love and boundaries, I would say, are the 2 foundations for parents.
Fantastic. So let's tease those 2 out a little bit more. I don't know, maybe we could talk about a typical week, or as we're looking ahead, the 6 weeks to the end of the year. I'm wanting to demonstrate real love to my children. I feel it in my heart, but sometimes there's a disconnect. Much of the time I'm tired, or I'm shattered. I've got other worries going on: finance, job, work, getting through this pandemic. What are some of the key things that I need to focus on in terms of demonstrating my love to my children?
Well, there's a book by a guy called Gary Chapman called The 5 Love Languages. And in that, he talks about 5 different ways that we can show someone that we love them. And it's through our words, through time, through gifts, through touch, and through actions. And his original book was in relation to marriage, but it applies to all our relationships and to our children. And so there's 5 different ways that we can show someone that we love them. But each one of us will have 1 or 2 of those ways that make us feel most loved. That's why it's called a love language. It's like the language we speak, the way that connects best for us. And our children, particularly when they're little, they need all those expressions of love. But as they get older, we can begin to spot the way that really works for them. So I know, for example, we have 4 children. They're grown now, but when they were little, our daughter was always sort of trying to give things to people, buy things for people. She'd come back from a party and she'd want to share her party bag and suddenly realize she hadn't got anything left for herself. She was always wanting to spend her pocket money and on other people, or collect shells from the beach if we're on holiday and give them to people. And so that was a little clue that for her, gifts were really important as a demonstration of love. And that's a tough one, because in our consumer society, it's not about the money involved, but it's about the thought that goes behind it. So I remember once when she was doing some exams and she got really stressed, and my husband got one little flower and put it in a jam jar and stuck it on her dressing table. And honestly, it topped her up in an incredible way. And each of our children will be different. So time is a tough one for parents at the moment, if we're trying to juggle all the different things we're having to do, particularly in the run up to Christmas now, whatever that's going to look like. But I think, again, if we can actually make that time to sit down, even if it's just to play a game with them, maybe at a meal table, but something to give them that focused attention, so they know that they are the center of what we're doing, not the activity that we're doing. That again can speak volumes and make children feel that they're loved. So in
Fantastic.
different ways, we can
Yeah.
talk for a long time on this, but I know you've got other stuff to cover. But working out what connects with your child, and it's about choices sometimes. Just making the effort to try and to just do that, maybe just once a day, connect with them in a way that makes them feel loved.
Amazing. That's so helpful. We will link to the book, and all the resources that we talk about will be in the links. You'll be able to find those. So let's talk a little bit about boundaries. As we're looking at family life and looking ahead, what are some of the key areas where I need to be thinking about, I should be putting boundaries in here, and what are some of the questions I need to be asking as I'm deciding on those boundaries?
Well, I think one of the bottom line things is to understand that boundaries are for our children's security. As Christians, we have a Father in heaven who puts boundaries down for us because he loves us. And it is the way to help our children feel secure and enable them to develop emotional resilience as well. So having some boundaries in place is really important. Otherwise, our children will think that we just don't care. But it's important, I think, one of the keys is to work out which boundaries are right for our family in accordance with our family values. What things really matter? There's a little phrase we often use, which is choose your battles. So if you make a big deal about something, say, I don't know, they've dyed their hair or something, and, it's not what you wanted at that particular moment. But then if you throw everything at that, then what have you got for the things that really matter that are coming down the line? So it's about working out what are the things that really matter to us? What are our values? What are the qualities in our children's lives that we're wanting to see grow? And then putting the boundaries in place that will help that. So one for us would have been curfew, what time they're coming in. There'd be one for us about telling the truth. I would always be much more cross if they didn't own up to something they'd done wrong, than for the actual misdemeanor in the first place. You might have family values around the meal table. There's lots that we could talk about the digital age and the kind of boundaries we put in place there. But I think if we look at the big picture, what are the qualities in our children's lives that we want them to grow? And then we can help those by putting boundaries in place and then thinking about the consequences for if they march across or sneak around one of them, which is what they're going to do. I mean, that's the other thing. I think the boundaries are there to be tested, and that's our job as parents. And it is exhausting, but that's the deal. If we're
Amazing. I wonder if you'd have any words at all. You spoke earlier about different kinds of parenting, and if someone knows that they've really fallen into the very permissive style of parenting, and they're feeling a bit of conviction about that, and they know that they need to start putting a few more boundaries in or enforcing those boundaries a little bit more, what are some steps they can take? What would be helpful for them? They're kind of, I know I've been too permissive, but how do I get it back to a more assertive style of parenting where I need to be? Where can they go? What can they do?
Okay, that's right. So permissive is that anything goes. There are very few rules, and those that aren't enforced. And I honestly, hands up, so many times, you're tired. It's at the end of the day, and I've been there, and I think we all will have done as parents. So, firstly, lay down the guilt, but then secondly, maybe think of one or two areas where you could think of something that you want your children to do. I mean, maybe you want them not to have their phones at the meal table, for example. So you choose, well, that's the thing we're going to focus on. Just one thing, one little step, rather than suddenly having loads and loads of rules in place. Just choose one and talk to your children about it and about why it's in place. And then if it's crossed, be really resolute in working out what are the consequences for stepping across that rule. And it's really helpful that consequences link with the thing that's happened. So a friend once said to me, if I don't put my bins out on a Wednesday morning, the local authority are not going to say, I'm going to confiscate your mobile phone. What's going to happen is I'm going to have to put up with rubbish outside my house for a whole week that's going to be smelly. So sometimes there's natural consequences to things that they may have done. And it's quite good to kind of get behind that. I often got that wrong. One of our children was a Newcastle supporter, our oldest, and I would just confiscate his football shirt, whatever he did. No consequence at all for the actual thing. So, and when I realized you could actually link it. So, for example, you've asked them to tidy up their toys and they haven't done it, and you've had to do it. Then you might say, well, we've only got time for one bedtime story tonight, not two, because mummy had to tidy up the toys because you didn't do it. So thinking the consequences, little phrases we have is say what you mean what you say, and choose your battles. So say yes to as much as possible, but the things that really matter, put a boundary in place for.
So great. So great. So I just want to touch on a few of the kind of specifics that you deal with in the book, because they're just huge issues for people that we're facing at the moment. You briefly mentioned one earlier, social media. So I don't want to put too much of an age thing on it, because every young person's different and every family's different, but maybe at kind of the year 6, year 7, year 8 stage, a lot of the young people that are in our church, they'll be starting to feel their way into social media. They'll have some friends at school who are totally jumped in and away, and they'll have others who aren't on it yet, but they're all beginning to explore it and so on. And parents of young people and children that kind of age, what questions do we need to be asking about social media? How do we keep the love and the boundaries thing going, in particular regard to social media? What wisdom can you give us from that? How can we walk forward?
Well, it is a minefield, and it's changing all the time. So, so the book that we're talking about, this one, Left to Their Own Devices, this is the second edition already, because things have moved so fast. So I think trying, first of all, to be interested in what our children are doing and what they're using social media for is not all bad. There's some incredible creative things that they can do through social media. It's the way they don't see a difference between online and offline generally. Our children just see this as life. And many of them just don't know any different depending on how old they are. They've just grown up in this digital world. So I think as parents, even if it's not our world, being interested and finding out what social media sites that they're on. And there are some age restrictions that will be your friend in that. And again, every parent is different, but deciding what's right for you and your family and your particular child, because our children are so different, and what's fine for one may not be fine for another because of their personality, their maturity, or whatever. And you here, we often say, they will say, everybody else's parent allows whatever, them to be on their Xbox at 2 a.m. before their maths exam or whatever the thing is. And but the chances are actually they don't. But this is about you and your family. So have confidence. It will mean taking a few hits in the popularity stakes sometimes, but we're not their best friend. We are their parents. They've got loads of best friends. And sometimes it does mean taking a few hits if we decide on something that's right or not for our family. But in relation to social media, I think it's really good to talk to our children about something like Instagram, about what people are actually putting up on Instagram, because very few of us put up the bad stuff. It's all the edited highlights, photographs of people that have been edited many times to look their absolute best. And somehow and if we are fooled by it, how much more are our children going to be drawn in? We know in our heads that's not reality, but somehow the power of it draws us in. And so really talking to them about what they're posting, what other people are posting, is it real? And having those conversations as part and parcel of family life, that's a really good place. That's a really good place to start.
Fantastic. So social media, as you say, it can be a mixed bag. There are definitely positives with it, as well as some significant negatives. I want to talk about a couple of real problem areas that we know are negatives, and how we can tackle those and how we can deal with those. So obviously a big one, and again, the age being affected is sadly getting younger and younger, is with online pornography. And I wonder if you'd have any wisdom, both in terms of prevention and cure. So how we can prepare our children and our young people for the fact that this is out there and it's prevalent, and also what to do if we find our children or young people kind of caught up in this kind of thing. How can you help us?
Yeah, it's a really big area. You're right. We saw a little vox pops recently. People gone out onto the street and asked young people question, how do you find out about sex? And probably 80% of them said porn. That's how they think. That's where they were going to find out about sex, which is so sad. And as concerned, caring parents, we can be the people that they come to. And it might be awkward and it might be embarrassing, but actually it's worth getting over a little bit of embarrassment in order to talk to our children about this subject, so they hear it from us and not from their friends, and not from looking at porn, and talking to them about the incredible gift that sex is in marriage, and talking to them about it from a healthy perspective, first of all. But then I think at a particular age, we do need to talk to them about the fact that pornography is out there, and they only need the filters not to be on the bit of equipment that they're using for some of this stuff to come at them. In fact, there's a really shocking statistic which is that the average age of a child coming across porn is 11 years old. And generally, they're not looking for it, but just the right protections aren't in place, the right parental controls on their devices, and all this stuff is coming at them. And this can be vicious stuff that can really ruin their lives for, in terms of how they see sex and relationships. So there's the putting the controls in place and making sure they're in place, but they're going to be at a friend's house. I know our boys came across porn at friends' houses when there weren't those protections in place. So we can't always be at their shoulder. So that's why we need to be talking to them about these things, and from a positive perspective, as well as having their eyes open. And there are lots of organizations that can provide support and help as well if parents are concerned about their children. The Naked Truth Project is brilliant organization for that. And so I think that would be my advice on that.
So good, thank you. So through this interview, what I'm picking up quite a lot is the obvious but very true, just the importance of communication with our children. You were talking about social media. We need to be able to talk with our children, with our young people, what's going on social media, that connection with the pornography and sex and relationships, the importance of talking and having those open channels of communication. How can you help us just in general with kind of establishing, keeping open those channels of communication with our children? Any, I don't know, tips and tricks, general principles, just to this open back and forth, when that can often be a difficult thing in families at particular times?
Yeah, I mean, in the book there are some specific ideas, but I think it's getting that to that place where the atmosphere in our home is one where our children feel they can talk to us, or if not us, if there's another adult in their life, maybe it's a youth group leader, maybe it's someone from the church, but someone else that they can talk to. So we can be unshockable, unoffendable, but have this as part and parcel of the conversation in our homes. And we're all busy, we're often passing like ships in the night. I think one of the this time has been so painful for so many, but one of the things, I think one of the advantages or little treasures in the darkness, I think the Bible calls it, from this pandemic, is people have had to slow down. We've had to slow down, and we've spent time together in our families that maybe we wouldn't have done when we were just rushing out to after school activities and meetings and everything. But in our family, we discovered when ours were little, we have 4, they're quite close together in age, and we didn't often get much one-to-one time with them. And so we began a little routine, and one of us would take one of them out to Tesco's for breakfast on a Saturday morning. And this became a really important little tradition. And we often wouldn't talk about anything sort of significant or deep or meaningful. It would be about the latest Topshop purchase, or who'd scored the latest Aston Villa goal, or whatever it was. But every now and then there was that moment when, and those moments sometimes that are gone before we know where that they're there, where there was the opportunity to talk about some of these really important things in their lives. So I think there's something about carving out the space and the time for these conversations. And they can be, teenagers don't like being pushed in a corner. They don't like being hemmed in. So teenagers in the car, sitting side by side on a breakfast bar, not, eye to eye, late at night, is always good for them. Whereas little ones, it's much better. You can give them eye contact, and you've got those little moments of, bath time, story time, bedtime, all those kind of things, when you can begin those conversations. So seizing moments of everyday family life, but making time as well.
Fantastic. So the other kind of specific I wanted to ask you about, and I read your book near the start of the pandemic, I think. So lockdown hadn't quite kicked in. But just the area of kind of screen time in general. And obviously, for some of the time, the young people, the children, they've had to do homeschooling as well. So that's meant education through screen, but restricted activities, restricted extracurricular stuff, so they've had much more time at home, almost certainly in most cases more time on screens in general. So I'm going to ask you that impossible question, but maybe pull out some principles for us. How much is too much, and what would be some concerning signs in a family, or as we're parenting, along with we're in quite a unique time that has pushed everybody indoors a little bit more. But kind of what would be concerning signs? What should we watch out for? Where might we think about putting some of the boundaries in just around screen time in general?
I think it's probably the issue that most parents contact us about is the frustration about screen time and their children spending most of their time glued to this glowing screen, or teenagers with headphones that need to be surgically removed as well. So, it is in every home. This is an issue. And I think, number one, I would say this is never a problem that we're going to solve. There's not an easy solution. It's a tension that we have to continually manage, and we have to keep coming back to it and keep coming back to it. The other important thing is, I think, to remember, and this is the pinch, we're role models in this. So if the first thing we do when we come in is check our emails, if we're always scrolling through our Twitter feed, and our children are trying to talk to us, then they will pick that up from us. We often say at Care for the Family, we ask our children to pick their coat up for the 50th time and it's still on the floor, and we think they're not listening. The truth is they don't miss a thing, and they will pick up from us. They'll take their cues from us as to the amount of time we are on social media. So that's another important one. And I think remembering that every child is different, and so what might seem too much for one might not feel such a deal for another. And time is really important, because if we're having too much time on screen, we're not having face-to-face contact with people, which we need. But equally, what they're doing on screens is as important. So Andy Robertson, who is a blogger, and he writes for the BBC on gaming, he says, if we're talking about food, we don't just talk about how much our children are eating. We talk about what they're eating. And so making sure, I mean, if they're doing sort of good things and creative things on social media, don't just ban screens per se, but let's be interested in what they're doing. But I think you asked about, what are the telltale signs? I had a really sad story of a nursery school in London, and one of the teachers, when she spoke to a child, they looked down for a screen, rather than looking up. And then other ones I've heard many primary school teachers who are having special classes for sort of dexterity, because the children don't know how to use a pencil, but they can easily use a console. And I think if we find that our child is in their bedroom all the time on a screen and they're withdrawing, that's a bit of a telltale sign. There could be other stuff going on there, mental health issues, bullying, whatever. But if they're just getting so drawn into screens, they're not engaging with family life, then I think, again, we need to take some action. But there's a lot of people say, how many hours should you have? And I don't think you can nail it on that. But one really good thing you can do as a family is have something called a family media agreement. And all this means is you get together as your whole family. So little ones, teenagers, everybody, make it fun. So you get some drinks and some snacks, and you talk about what are your ground rules for media use in the home. And the rub is everybody signs up for this, even the parents. And you can talk about, screen time, which is this issue, but you could talk about what platforms they're allowed on, what do they do if they find something that's scary, who pays, how they behave, the kind of things they can say to each other, all those kind of things you can put in this. And it's called a family media agreement. It doesn't sound a bit grand. It's just a discussion, really, about how you're going to behave. And you can have 3 columns. You could have, yes, you can, ask us first, don't even think about it. And obviously appropriate to age. So if you've got different age children, what's right for a 16-year-old is probably not all right for an 11-year-old. And some families stick it up in the kitchen. and other families just talk about it. But having that basis, and particularly about time on screens, I think can really help, because it gives something to go back to. And if the teenagers particularly think they've had some skin in the game, if they've had a voice, they're much more likely to buy into it.
Fantastic. So good. So good. So coming towards the end, just a couple more questions, and we'll talk about resources and things. So one question, there may well be people watching this in the church. They're not parents. There might be uncle or auntie, a friend, youth leader, mentor. So how can the church help? As a church, we've got a value of raising sons and daughters in the faith, and it's not just for parents, it's for all of us as the church. So what are some of the key ways somebody who doesn't have that direct parental responsibility, or maybe the children are no longer in the home, how can they keep feeding into the next generation and blessing the next generation? What are some of the key things we can all be doing?
That's a lovely value. I really love that. There's that wonderful phrase, isn't there? It takes a village to raise a child. And actually, as a parent, I so valued other people who would speak into our children's lives. There was one particular youth leader, and he used to take one of our kids out for this hot chocolate mountain that seemed to involve quantities of cream and marshmallows and all sorts on a Wednesday, quite often after school. And they just talk about stuff, about hopes and dreams and failures and football and just whatever. But I think as a parent, knowing that there are other people that are interested in your children, that care for them, and that can help speak into their lives is just so precious. And as a church, we're just so well placed to do that. Obviously, it needs to be people that we know and trust. But I think that's great. And having people that will pray for our children as well, because we often say as parents that our job isn't to bring up children, and it's not to bring up teenagers. Our job is to bring up adults who can stand on their own 2 feet long term, who can know who they are, who can make wise decisions. And in this area of technology, we're not always going to be there at their shoulder. And so our ultimate goal is to equip them to make wise choices themselves. And I think the church family can come alongside and just speak into that in a very powerful way.
Amazing. Thank you. Also, I wanted to ask the question that there may well be people listening to this, watching this, parents, and they're thinking, do you know what? We are in crisis, or we're close to crisis. Some of the principles that you're talking about, I feel so far away. I feel like I've lost the battles already, lost too many battles. We're feeling like we're drowning a bit here. Where can we point people to who are feeling like they're in crisis, who feeling like the battles are already been lost? What can we do?
Yeah, I would want just to reach out to all those parents and say, it's never too late. And there are many, many people that can come alongside and help. And we've seen time and again, parents contact us at Care for the Family. And, a year later, they've got back in touch, and situations that seemed really, really desperate have turned around. So if in left to their own devices, if it's a specific issue to do with bullying or pornography, sexting, any of those kind of things, there's a list of organizations at the back that you can go to for help and support. But at Care for the Family as well, we have something called Care Line. And it's just a telephone. It's a listening service, signposting, but we love to be able to speak to people and just to hear their story, to pray for them if that's what they'd like, and to be able to support them on that journey. So do pick up the phone to us at Care for the Family. And I know your church as well will provide a wealth of support for that, but don't keep it to yourselves. And every parent goes through tough times.
Yeah, I just really want to reiterate that. I know it can feel strange at this time watching a video on YouTube or it's in your social media feed, but do take that step. Get in touch, send the message. All the details are in our profiles, and we'd love to hear from people. We love to be of service where we can. So don't just scroll through. If you need to reach out and connect with somebody, that's what we're here for. So Catherine, there's the book, Left to Their Own Devices, and we would love to get you a copy of that as a church. If you're watching this and you're thinking, I would read that, I would find that helpful, please get me a copy. Again, get in contact with us. We'll get you a copy. But that's somewhere that people can go. Where else can people go for resources from you, Catherine, and from Care for the Family? What's out there? There's just been a wealth of wisdom. There's been real gold, and I know that you guys have lots more. So how can we get hold of it?
So our website, careforthefamily.org.uk. If you want some books, so various other books we've written about marriage and parenting in particular. So you can look at all of those on the shop section of the website. But I would say more than that, check out our podcasts, check out our events. So just at the moment, instead of going around the country, we're producing online events. And so there'll be some new ones coming out in the spring, just an hour long. They're free. So check into those, and I'm sure there'll be something. There's something for everybody in those events as well. And specifically with Left to Their Own Devices, we've got an online course that I think you're going to be running as a church. Yeah. And again, there's some great interviews on that. There's and time to talk about these things together as parents, which is so often where the real gems happen. You find out that someone else has got the same issue, but they've discovered a different way of dealing with it. And so I'd really recommend that as well.
Amazing. Just to finish, Catherine, I'm going to give you one free hit. Is there anything else you'd like to say to parents, particularly out there watching? Anything that you'd like to leave us with as we close this interview?
I would say just remember what an incredible job it is to be a parent, to be able to bring up the next generation. And it is hard, but you will be doing an amazing job. So hang on in there. And it goes so fast. As a grandmother now, I can't quite believe we've got these 2 little grandchildren who are 1. And I think, where did that go? But yeah, enjoy the good bits and just hang on in there through the challenging times. And it's an incredible God-given task.
Amazing. Catherine Hill, thank you so much. All the links to everything that we've spoken about in this interview, you can find those in the description. Do reach out and contact us if you want further resources. Please do check out everything that Catherine has highlighted, and we really hope that's been helpful to you and equipped you as parents. Keep going for it.